Hi folks! Today we will be making a mold of this little dragon. It's actually going to be several molds because he is so complicated he needs to be cut into pieces. His head and neck will be a piece, each arm and leg will be a piece, his entire torso and tail and both wings are all separate molds. Let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is cut the dragon into more manageable sized pieces. A sculpture like this would be almost impossible to mold as is because of the number of undercuts. And undercutting is a term in sculpture and mold making that you may not be familiar with unless you are into sculpture and mold making, but undercuts are the most impossible thing to deal with when you're trying to remove a piece from a mold. Essentially, it's anything that's curving the opposite direction from the rest of the piece. So when it comes to this particular sculpture, the toes, the arms, the bends in the elbows and knees, and pretty much every little tiny crevice underneath every single scale technically is an undercut. So this is a very complicated piece to mold, and that's why I'm painstakingly removing every angle I can manage, which you see me doing here, and it leaves a lot of pieces. So now that we have all our pieces, I'm ready to put each piece into its own mold. I use these little metal frames because they're just sturdier, they're more reliable than making your own frames, they don't leak, they're very tight. They don't stand up very well, which is annoying, but otherwise, I highly recommend getting little frames. I've got a bunch of different sizes. You want to make sure you have at least 1/4 inch on both sides, because when you use these molds later, you're going to be pushing down on them and you don't want to smush whatever it is that's inside your mold. These larger ones are better suited for the bigger pieces. And this process is definitely tricky because right now you're seeing me put the sprues on, which later when pouring in metal, that is essentially a gate for the metal to flow into the piece. So they have to be located fairly strategically. If they're in the wrong place, there'll be gaps in the casting, which is not good. So this might look easy, but there's some strategy involved. You want to make sure that your metal has the cleanest path all the way through, that it won't get hung up. So the next order of business here is filling these molds with silicone. I use an RTV silicone that is 1-to-1 mixing ratio, volume or weight, which makes it really easy for regular people to do. You don't have to be a math whiz to get this right. It does really help to have a vacuum machine. You see all these bubbles coming out of the molds. Make sure that your castings later aren't full of little bubbles, which can be incredibly annoying. So highly recommend a vacuum machine if you're going to use silicone for mold making. Okay, so we fast forwarded a little bit here, and now the molds are cured and they're ready to be removed from the frames. So you just kind of pop them out. They make a really satisfying sound, but you can't hear it, sorry. But anyways, here they all are, and now I have to cut them open. And this has to be done with a really sharp knife, like really sharp. If it's not really sharp, you're gonna get little snags in your silicone, and that's incredibly annoying. And it also doesn't help the functionality of the mold. So these lines need to be super clean cut. And I cut in a zigzag pattern because it helps the mold stay together when you're shooting wax into it. Wax pushes in with a good amount of pressure through the nozzle, and if you have flat seams, sometimes they will split or they'll slip a little bit and then you get flashing, which you have to clean up later, or you end up with more flashing on your castings, and it's just not fun. So that's why we zigzag, if you're wondering. As you can see, this is a really long process. Organic materials like leaves and sticks and twigs have so much texture that when you make a mold with silicone, the silicone leaches into all the tiny little details and it hangs on for dear life, I'm telling you. So there is some struggle happening to get these pieces out of this silicone. And as you can imagine, it is very easy to stab yourself while you're doing this, so please be careful. X-Acto blades, especially brand new ones, are crazy sharp. So like, just pay attention to what the heck you're doing, because it is super easy to maim yourself. Especially with these big thick ones, because you really have to hold them open with all your might and it's easy to slip. It would also probably help to do this without a super needy cat sitting on your lap, but some of us do not have that luxury, so I keep on keeping on even with this little monster just constantly grabbing at me and being annoying, but I love him, so I let him stay. So we made it to the last mold, and I needed a little bit of help with this one because it was so thick that the silicone was just giving me nothing. It was so hard to hold open, my fingers were killing me. But we finally did it, we made it, they're all clean. Look at that pile of remnants. Whew, yep. So here's the pile of molds. All of these came from that one sculpture. Now it's time to cast. Wish me luck.